Good morning. So today we will talk about the chain of infection and mode of transmission of disease. So next, chain of infection. So when we say chain, connected to each other or called links, while infection is a lodgement and multiplication of microorganism in the body. Kumbaga dira nagapuyo o nagapadagan ang mga bacteria or microorganism. So what is chain of infection is a process in which a favorable condition is required for microorganism to spread or transfer from reservoir to a susceptible host. So later on, we will discuss what is reservoir and susceptible host. So we'll know that bacteria are present inside us and around us in our environment. They are fast to spread or transfer through the air or touching. So certain conditions must be met in order for microbe or infectious disease to be spread from person to person. So even our healthcare professional, we are actually touching our eyes, nose, and mouth without even realizing it, which actually causes or spread infection in a much faster. So the transmission of infection depends on 6 elements such which link together like a chain. So next, we have the infectious agent, reservoir, portal of exit, mode of transmission, portal of entry, susceptible host. So next, infectious agent disease, any microorganism that can cause a disease such as bacteria, fungus, virus, or parasite. So infectious disease is the harmful germ or pathogen that causes the infection, illness, or disease. Kumbaga, makuha nato siya like sa environment or paligid nato which can cause or makahatag niya sakit sa atoa. So second, we have the reservoir, the place where the microorganism resides, thrive, and reproduce. So dira nagapuyo o nagapadagan ang mga microorganism. Example sa food, sa water, or sa kanang pindutanan niya sa elevator. So they can also either sa person or an animal sometimes replicate in environmental reservoirs such as water and soil. So to break down this link, use the PPE or personal protective equipment and personal good hand hygiene. So we have here the 3 categories of reservoirs. So first, we have the human reservoir. So as a human being, human beings infected by pathogens that exist on or within the human body. So we have here the cases. There are a number of important pathogens that are specifically adapted to man, such as measles, smallpox, typhoid, meningococcal meningitis, gonorrhea, syphilis. The cycle of transmission is from human to human. So measles is more like skin rashes, good. Ang symptoms niyan is high fever, ubo, sipon. It's a kind of virus. It can pass through direct contact and through the air. So we call tigdas. So meningococcal meningitis is an example of disease that we can acquire through droplet transmission. So carriers is a person who has become infected with a pathogen but does not show any signs or symptoms. So kibali infected siya tapos infected siya pero wala siya nagapakita og sign nga naa siya sakit. Dili ta makaingon nga kani siya nga tawo na ay sakit pero infected na di siya. Second, we have the animal reservoir. The source of infection may sometimes be animals and birds. So kumbaga sa animals nato makuha ang sakit. Example is katong Ebola nga gikan daw sa bat or birds or monkey nga naka-acquire nato sa ilaha. So third, we have the non-living things. Soil and inanimate matter can also act as reservoir of infection. Example, tetanus in soil. So tetanus once nga maapakan nimo ang lansang na ay kaling or dugay na dira sa sa lupa, then masamad imuhang tiil or any other parts imong lawas, kana siya mao na siyang makaano siya tetanus, then ma-infection po na siya pag dili kung ginapasagdaan ra nimo kung wala kay kinabuhat. So next, we have the portal of exit or mode of escape. So this refers to the route by which the infectious microorganisms escape or leave the reservoir. For example, pathogens that cause respiratory disease usually escape through the respiratory tract, coughing and sneezing. So from the word itself, exit meaning palabas. Example is katong coughing and sneezing, and also if a person is bleeding during diaper change or toileting. So we have here the respiratory tract. Microorganisms leave the body of the infected person by means of droplets exhaled as a spray when coughing, sneezing, talking, singing, or just breathing. So once nga na ay sakit ang isa ka tao, tapos duol mo nagistorya, posible nga na ang iyang gina-exhaled nga hangin is mahanggab nimo, or nagkanta siya, or nagstorya mo, possible na matakdan ka. So to breaking the link, wear a mask, do not talk directly into patient's face, stay home if you are sick, dili sige lakaw, dapat mukaon ka sa saktong oras, kaon o mo inom og tubig, ka vegetables, and also tambal. So practice good cough etiquette, cover your cough at sneeze, di sige pataka asag ubo, hatsin, cover ka pag naaka sa public. Perform good hand hygiene. So next, we have the gastrointestinal tract. So microorganisms that leave the body of the infected person by means of body secretion, example stool and vomiting. So once nga infected ng isa ka tao or grabe na ang iyahang sakit, possible nga magawas niya or masuka niya ang mga hugaw. So to breaking the link, handle and dispose of body secretions properly, use personal protective equipment, perform good housekeeping. Yeah, like atong according kay Anne Madden, after she researched with the help of microscopic, she found out that there are 600 species on bugs live in our home. So we should always clean our home every day, para malayo ta sa mga sakit, kay dira pod nag-start nga ma-acquire na to ang mga sakit, and perform good hand hygiene. So next we have the skin. Microorganisms that leave the body of the infected person by wound, drainage, or skin, or through skin lesions. So pag nagkasugat ka or pag nagkasugat ka, dapat na buhaton para dili na puy-an sa bakterya or mabaho ng sugat nimo. Kung kinakailangan hugasan nimo, or tambalan or other para maano ka sa infection. So to breaking the link, dispose of wound dressing properly, use personal protective equipment or PPE, and perform good hand hygiene. So next and lastly, we have the blood. Infection may occur when someone's blood gets into another person's system. Of course, kanang mga sharp or any object nga mga sharp, makakause na siya infection pag ginapasagdaan na nimo. So dapat na kay buhaton or tambalan nimo para dili na siya ma-infection o makasulod ang mga bacteria. So to breaking the link, safe handling or sharps, use gloves for procedures where there is risk of exposure to blood, perform good hand hygiene. So mode of transmission, the means by which an organism transfer from one carrier to another by either direct transmission, direct contact between infectious host or susceptible host, or direct transmission which involves an intermediate carrier like an environmental surface or piece of medical equipment. So mode of transmission, this is how the infection agent is transmitted from one person to another. So later on we will discuss what is direct transmission and indirect transmission. So we have the mode of disease transmission. We have the two categories, which are direct and indirect. So under direct we include direct contact, droplet spread, while indirect include airborne, vehicle-borne, vector-borne, either mechanical or biological. So I will give the floor to Mr. Keith Tabaliha to continue this topic. So good luck and watch his video.
Good morning, everyone. This is the continuation of our topic in chains of transition. The mode of transmission. This means by which the organism transfers from one carrier to another by either direct transmission, direct contact between infectious host and susceptible host, or indirect transmission, which involves intermediate carrier like an environmental surface or piece of medical equipment. So this explains that in every organism they have direct and indirect. And direct involves the chain of transmission of one microorganism transfers to another substance. Next is the modes of disease transmission. So the direct and indirect. And under the direct is direct contact and droplet spread, while the indirect is airborne, vehicle-borne, vector-borne, mechanical, and biological. So the direct contact is the most common route of transmission of organism in healthcare settings. For example, like illustration 1 is biting the hand of the child, which is the microorganism from one transfers to another is the most harmful or substance that can transfer to another human. And the next illustration is shaking hands. So shaking hands is one of the mode of transmissions that we get easily from the carrier, which is the person 1 transmits to the other hand, which is the person 2. So it occurs through skin-to-skin contact, kissing, or sexual intercourse. The direct contact also refers to contact with soil or vegetation harboring infectious organism. Thus, infection, mononucleosis, kissing disease, and gonorrhea are spread from person to person by direct contact. So, next is the droplet spread. This explains that the contact with mucous membrane directly or indirectly through. So, in illustration 1, for example, sneezing, that is the way of mode of transmission that bacteria occurs. And this illustration 2 is coughing. It is the one of the example of transferring or mode of transferring bacteria to another. And the last illustration is the 3 women that can talk, and the saliva is spreading to each other that can usually harm them or for you, that can cause the disease that you might get it. And the next is contact with the soil. This disease agent may be acquired by direct exposure of susceptible tissue, the disease agent, soil, compost, or decaying vegetable matter. For example, ang tetanus, if ikaw ay merong wound, syempre mas mapadali lang ang pagpasok ng mga microorganisms or bacteria if ikaw ay naglalakad ng walang suot na tsinelas, at mas madali siyang makapasok sa iyong wounds na madali lang kapitan. And the next is mycosis. It is example kani siya kay natawag ni siya og kanang kagid or kanang peklat na uga, and mas madali lang siya makapasok ang mga microorganisms. And last is the hookworm larvae. So from the soil din siya na, which is madali lang siyang makapasok sa iyong skin, and through spreading the direct contact. And the next is the inoculation into skin or mucosa, such as rabies virus by dog bite, hepatitis B virus through contaminated needle strings and syringes. This is the one that can create another mode of transmission the virus can create. So usually makita naman dyan ninyo na isa po niya sa example sa mga direct na contact. And the next is transplacental or vertical transmission torch agents such as Toxoplasma gondii, Rubella virus, cytomegalovirus, and herpes virus, Varicella virus, syphilis, hepatitis B, Coxsackie B, and AIDS. Some of the non-living agents, example, the diethyl stilbestrol. So it is the one of mode of transmission that occur. And the next is indirect. Indirect refers to the transfer of an infectious agent from a reservoir to host by suspended air particles, inanimate objects such as vehicles or animate intermediaries or vectors. So this embraces a variety of mechanisms including the 5 F's, such as flies, fingers, vomits, food, and fluid. In indirect transmissions is the airborne. Is any disease that caused by pathogens can be transmitted through air. So, ang airborne, which is ang virus through airborne, isa po ni siya ka way na mas makadali ug sulod ang virus through air. Ug dali lang siya mag-transmit sa isa ka tao na dali lang pod makasulod or dali lang pod ang way sa iyahang pag-transmit. Next is the vehicle-borne, an indirect transmission of an infectious agent that occurs when a vehicle touches a person's body or ingested. So, such as the sa mga sasakyan ang kanang aso or ang ilahang aso na gikan sa makina, mas easily pud siya maka-transmit og mga bacteria or mga microorganisms na maka-harm pud sa imong body. Dali lang pud ka makasagap og virus. And next one is vector-borne, defined as arthropod or any living carrier that transports an infectious to agent susceptible individual. Infectious agents are transmitted by insects, especially the blood. This includes mosquitoes, fleas, and ticks. So, sa vector-borne, mas dali na po siya maka-cause of manang transmission by the insects or the bite of the insects, because it is indirect transmit by the substance that can interact to another substance. And next is the vomit or borne. The vomits are inanimate articles or substances other than water or food contaminated by the infectious discharges from a patient incapable harboring and transferring infectious agent to a healthy person. So, sa vomits, such as our clothes, for example, so if ang isa ka thing or material na attract siya sa isa ka infectious na thing or object, dali lang po siya maka-transmit og microorganisms and bacteria or virus na mas maka-harm pa sa isa ka human. And then, the unclean hands and fingers. Hands are the most common medium by which pathogen agents are transferred to the food from the skin, nose, bowel, etc., as well as from the other food. So, isa po ni siya sa mga infectious or mode of transferring the bacteria, such as kanang dili limpyo imong kamot, mas managanang bacteria if ang imong hands is dili clean, and the more na mas daghan kag ginagunitan na bagay or mas dali lang ka makuanan og sakit. And then the next is the portal of entry or modes of entry. The opening where infectious diseases enters the host body, such as mucous membranes, open wounds, or tubes inserted in body cavities like urinary catheters or feeding tubes. So, isa po ni siya kaning portal of entry na maka-access to the tissues which is the toxin can act. Often, infectious agents use the same portal to enter a new host. For example, mga influenza virus exits the respiratory tract of the source host and enters the respiratory tract of the new host. And the last one is the respiratory tract. Small particles that results evaporation of droplets from the respiratory of infectious persons remain suspended in the air, poorly ventilated spaces of periods of time. So, ang respiratory tract is ang tao na siya problema sa iyang respiratory system, mas dali lang siya mas dali lang mag-reproduce ang mga bacteria sa iyang body, which is makapahina sa imuhang lawas. So, the breaking the link to avoid this is wear a mask or respirator, maintain good ventilation, isolate those people with respiratory symptoms, good respiratory hygiene etiquette practices, or perform good hand hygiene. So these are the um, things that we use to avoid these diseases. In gastrointestinal tract, pathogens, microorganisms enter the body and new host contaminated food. So sa imuhaning digestive system, which is the more the contaminate ang imuhang gikaon or na-absorb sa imuhang lawas, mas dali lang po siya mag-reproduce sa imuhang body, which is maka-create siya og ganang magsakit ang imuhang tiyan or sa imuha bang giinom or sa imong gikaon, dali na po ka masakit or magsige kag tae-tae or maglibang ihi-ihi or dili ka kaihi. So daghan gyud possible na mga sakit ang ano sa imuha. So breaking the link, dispose of body excretions carefully, careful food handling, perform a good housekeeping, and wear appropriate personal protective equipment. So last is the mucous membranes. Absorption of microorganisms through exposed eyes, nose, and mouth. So ang mga microorganisms and bacteria or virus na mas dali siya maka-pass through sa carrier. For example, sa imong face, dira jud mas kasagaran mag-reproduce if ikaw dili ka naga personal hygiene. So mas dali lang jud siya mag-reproduce sa mga microorganisms sa imong face na mag-create og mga ugas ngana kung if dili ka magkabalo mag-alaga sa imong personal body or imong body. So breaking the link, carry out good housekeeping, and perform a good hand hygiene. So that's all, and thank you.